This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Getting real close to the end of the year, and so much has been happening in the NBA world. But, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes you got to miss someone in order to appreciate how the game will be missing them. And I think the long-awaited return of this NBA superstar, we'd be remiss if we did not figure out a way to have a true, honest conversation about the impact of how the NBA is going to look like, you know, once this player returns. And it's always great to be able to sit down and have conversations with people who will keep their pulse on what is happening, not only just with the team that has that superstar player, but also how that impact is going to affect them, the media friends, and everything like that. So this is a great show, and I'm so happy to be able to have my man, my partner in crime, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? Great show, special show, and always it's great to have you on board again.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm in the piece. Don't have my best self here with me, but that's why I went and got reinforcements up in this joint. And when we're talking about a team like the team we're going to be talking about here, it's important to be able to, like I said, to go to the source and have somebody who has intimate knowledge of what's going on here. We had him on our show some time ago. He may not have remembered this back when he was back here in the Miami days. We have some friends. My guy, JD and Nunzio, I used to work with him at the Miami Herald and everything like that too. But my guy, Michael Wallace, into this joint to talk a little Grizzlies here. But let's turn it over to Michael, man. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on The Baseline, brother. So good to see you again, family.
Hey, happy holidays to you guys, man. And that's going back. So if we go back that far, man, we definitely family. And I appreciate it, man. Good to be on with you guys.
And so for our listeners who have, don't often have an opportunity to keep up with some of the more premier media contributors and members, Michael Wallace has been doing this thing for quite some time. You can always catch his work. He is senior editor, contributor, and analyst for Grind City Media. You can also catch him on Twitter X at MyMikeCheck, and also check out the works that him and his team do at Grind City Media. And Michael, this is all about, who you've been covering for this time, the long-awaited return after a tumultuous quarter of a season, going all the way back to the second half of last season with Morant coming back to the Memphis Grizzlies. I first want to get your take. What was your overall thought process leading up to this point, knowing that he was going to have to sit down in front of those cameras to get those Q&As from you and from all of the media people about what his expectations are, what, frankly, your expectations were, and how he was going to be able to address his situation and the impact that it's had on the Memphis Grizzlies organization and his teammates?
Great question. I think first and foremost, guys, to me, what I was thinking of in Ja's situation was he going to stand on his message, stand on, have 3 or 4 or 5 things that he wanted to address and stick to the script and address those things and not necessarily get pulled in a lot of different directions, not take some of the questions personal, not sort of lose his composure and get standoffish and not get pouty. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times when Ja has done this in the past, it didn't take long for him to feel like it was him against the world. And that included him against the media standing in front of him, asking him these questions. And, again, he knows now. What I wanted to see, and I think he showed this, was a realization and an acceptance that, hey, I put myself in this position. Nobody put me here but me. And now I have to be able to say, yes, I've learned. And yes, I'm ready to move forward from it. And I think, by and large, he handled himself and comported himself in a very, very good way, a professional way. And, he stuck. He didn't elongate any of his answers. You know what I mean? He didn't, try to ramble on and on and on, and he didn't get really, really short with guys. So I thought this was, as far as Ja Morant press conferences as it relates to this issue with his sort of off the court matters, this was the best one yet. And he knows that it's not about words, though. It's about action. So we'll see what those words the other day mean as he moves forward.
Michael, I think one of the things that I noticed or what I saw, people were trying to still nitpick him a little bit, right? Because I think the tone in which he delivered, I think it's just kind of his tone. But, he wasn't supposed to be up there smiling and joking. So like, I didn't really know what people wanted from him in some degree, but as you alluded to, he delivered what he needed to deliver and he said what he needed to say, and he just wants to kind of do it on the court. But do you get any sense of that, from even from the team, where it's like, do people not believe it, or they just want to see it on the court at this point?
The people here in Memphis, this is not, this thing happened back in March initially, and then it happened again right after that. So we've been dealing with this for 8 months. And in addition to the firearm and the social media, he's also had some other issues, with some things that have been documented with he and his family and how they've gone about conducting their business when they feel violated around the city. So some of this stuff is I don't want to say it's old hat, but when you're dealing with media who have been covering Ja more off the court over the last 8 months than they have obviously with him on the court, there's a little bit of apathy, there's a little bit of cynicism, there's a little bit of dismissiveness. Okay, you saying this, you said this before. As a matter of fact, one of the better columnists that we have in this city started his piece, and he did a brilliant job with it. It was a critical piece, but he gave 4 Ja Morant quotes to open his column, and he asked the reader, okay, now I'm challenging you. At what point did Ja Morant say these 4 things? Did he say them back in March? Did he say them this week when he came back? Did he say them before then? And it was all, hey, I learned my lesson. I'm going to be better. I know my actions speak louder than words. It was the same things that he said before that he reiterated this time again. And so the point of that guy's column was that, hey, you know what? Look, we've been here before with Ja. We just want to get back to basketball. Let's get back to covering this young man as one of the most phenomenal players in the NBA. So, he did what he had to do. He answered the questions. I thought, because there's so much space between March when this went down and June when the suspension was handed out, and now, he really didn't want to dig back into the finer details. He just wanted to say, look, I've been away, I've learned, and let's roll. And now, you got to hold them accountable for that. I do not believe Ja Morant is going to make that same mistake again. I just don't. Now, is he going to make a different one? Is there going to be a lapse of judgment here or there, everywhere, just like we all are? Yes. But I don't think he's going to make that specific mistake as it relates to social media getting caught in a compromising position again. So we'll see if everything else lines up from there.
Senior editor, contributor, and analyst for Grind City Media, our man Michael Wallace joining us here on the baseline as we discuss Ja Morant's return to the Memphis Grizzlies and the impact. I don't want to conflate the question I'm going to ask you, Michael. I don't want to conflate this situation with regards to what has recently transpired with, say, Draymond Green. But clearly, there is a negative connotation that's kind of permeating with certain players who have a stigma, have an essence about them, the way they handle their business on and off the court, things of that nature. I want to go to something that you had highlighted in one of your articles, where Ja Morant is quoted during the press conference saying, "I can't make nobody believe me outside of my actions. So answering this question with just words probably won't mean nothing to nobody." Now, again, you highlighted this eloquently just a moment ago about how he just kept everything straight to the point. He did not want to, get too much into everything. But I want to know, when you hear something like that, what do you think that's saying to his teammates? Because obviously, the bigger question to me is, Ja Morant is not dealing with the same roster that he's had over the last couple of years. A lot of the turnaround in the volatility of what we're seeing is highlighted because of the dysfunctionality that kind of existed with a Memphis Grizzlies team that people had high expectations over the last couple of seasons. So when I hear those kind of comments, I know that those comments are meant for the media, but think about it as a teammate and knowing that this has not been the first time that we've been dealing with a situation where our leader needs to be here and be present. So what do you think, like, what was the air amongst the teammates knowing he's coming back, this is what's happening, and where the state of the Memphis Grizzlies are?
And I think that's a great point that you make right there. And I think, I haven't necessarily thought about it from that angle until you just articulated it. And that is with regards to the quote that you just read from Ja Morant, how his teammates, how that fell with them, how did that hit with them? And I think it's important to note that Ja has been around these guys every single day on every single road trip through these first 24 games, 23. As a matter of fact, he's going to leave again with them on Sunday to go for the last game of his suspension in Oklahoma City before he shows up in New Orleans on Tuesday. He's been at practices. He's been at shoot-arounds. He's been on the bus. He's been at team hotels. He's gone to team dinners and all of those things. So there was nothing that Ja Morant said during his press conference that his teammates hadn't heard directly from him over the course of the last 2-3 months of this season. So I think what it says to them is that, hey, man, look, we're not here because Ja Morant and the Draymond Green situation is largely on-court antics and things that he's doing in the space of basketball, whether it's what he did with Jordan Poole, whether it's what he did with Rudy Gobert, whether it's what he did, with Sabonis and those guys, or even the most recent act, with Nurkic. It's not like his teammates have to cover for him, Ja, in that situation where we don't know what we're going to get when this guy gets on the basketball court. They know exactly what Ja is going to deliver on the basketball court as it relates to their income and their success. What they want to see is, hey, Ja, when we're not around you, make sure that you tighten up a little bit and don't get caught in compromising positions. And if you could do that, then that can make you available for us. The biggest quote to me that Ja said was that, listen, I take full responsibility for what happened with this team, for them to be 6-18. And it's not because I was there. It was because I wasn't there to go to war with them, get on the court with them and play with them.
Man, that's a big,
and that's the main thing right there. And so for him to say that, they know that, he knows that, and now he has to continue to show that by not being absent again.
Michael, I got to follow up on that because one of the things that Cal and I spoke about when one of the first incidents happened with him is like, well, is he ready to be in this leadership position? Is he equipped to do that now? Or because we know they brought in Derrick Rose, obviously Steven Adams on the team, Marcus Smart's on the team that hasn't been able to really play. But what is your standpoint on his leadership ability and capabilities, if you will, to be on this Memphis Grizzlies team in that role?
Well, see, that's the thing about, when you're the best player and you're the superstar, yeah, you lead dynamically on the court as a point guard out of position. But in terms of temperament and how you go about conducting your business off the court or in the locker rooms, Ja Morant doesn't have the loudest voice. He doesn't have the most resonating voice. He's not a rah-rah, rally around me kind of guy off the court. Now, on the court, because of the way he plays, he has to get everybody involved. He has to be the catalyst in that situation. But what the team needed was a double down on veteran voices. Now, he's also surrounded by mild-mannered guys. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not going to get in anyone's face. Desmond Bane is a leader. Obviously, we know Marcus Smart is an in-your-face type leader. Derrick Rose is a leader by example and by what he's shown in terms of experience. Steven Adams, when he was around, is a leader when it comes to the way he goes about galvanizing the locker room. So the good thing about Ja is that they also understand, look, when you come back, you don't have to come back and take over huddles and take over, where we're going to eat at after the game and you don't have to do any of those things in the locker room or anything on outside the court. Just be yourself. We got your back. And another thing too is that sometimes Ja didn't even, he didn't spend time after games hanging out with his teammates. He had his own crew with him, his own family to go to, and those guys traveled on the road with him and even at home. So I think now he's had to dwindle his circle a little bit and focus on what he needs to do to stay, number one, active, stay healthy, and try to get this season turned around because he's going to have more scrutiny on him now than ever before.
One last question, Michael, before we kind of pivot into now, what the expectations are for the Memphis Grizzlies. And you mentioned this, and it's just kind of aligned with Shaw's question regarding the leadership aspect of things. Mm-hmm. Do you see Ja Morant, though, taking a different turn? I understand like maybe dwindling down the circle, but do you see him taking a different turn in the way that he wants to show that he has leadership capabilities? Like when you see him or when you hear his words, is he coming from a place as a player, or is he coming from a place of, I now recognize that I am the pillar of this franchise, that this franchise over the next 5-10 years, even what, let's say, just assume that he's supposed, he's going to come down and we have to talk about Supermax and getting that bag. There's going to be an element that has to justify this organization giving him exactly what he needs. Right? Like, do you see a little bit different of the, like we saw that with Kobe Bryant. He recognized that for his legacy, he had to change something, especially after that scandal in Colorado, that he can be his own man and not ride the coattails of Shaquille O'Neal, not ride the coattails of Phil Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Like he had to establish his own. Do you kind of expect that, or do you kind of see that with John Morant and what we're talking about so far as like leadership, taking his own, elevating himself in a different space? Like this is a second coming of John Morant's recognition because of the suspension and everything that is not happened for the Memphis Grizzlies.
You know, and I'll pick up where you left off on the term second coming right there. And I want to start with that because I think this is still the first coming of John Morant. You know what I mean? I don't think that we saw a finished product before he had his misstep. I thought we saw a guy stumbling through adulthood with millions and millions of dollars, trying to find relevance for the first time in his life with these kind of resources, because he's never had that. This was a young man who grew up in small town South Carolina, wasn't highly recruited coming out of high school, went to Murray State, didn't balloon up until he got to the NCAA tournament that second year. And then all of a sudden he's the number 2 overall pick. And then all of a sudden he has all of this money and all of this franchise at his fingertips and this city at his fingertips. And then, oh, by the way, he becomes, you know, next in line behind Steph Curry as the most likable, kid friendly. Everybody wants to wear his jerseys and meet him, his hair, his style. He's the next coming of Iverson, all of these kind of different things. Now, all of a sudden he has a level of relevance that he never had to manage before. And I think he had to figure out, how much does this really mean to me? How far can I stretch these limits? You know, what can I do? And then when you have all of that money and all of that influence and very few people who are capable of telling you no where you're accepting that no, then, you know, it's a dangerous combination, man. And, you know, again, to do that at 21, 22, 23, you're learning all the way through it. But, you know, so this second coming, I'm not going to say like Kobe was basically at that point. And to a certain extent, Ja was, you know, he ran a foul. Basically, I'll just break it down. What Ja did was dumb. He did something stupid on social media that a teenager would do, not a grown man who is a billion, you know, has $1 billion of corporate investment surrounding him. He didn't do that. Kobe did something that was borderline criminal, and it became a civil case. He was fighting for a lot more at that stage of his career. What Ja did was something that you're supposed to be able to learn from, and now you want to show how defiant you are. I think when you look at him now, does he realize, and to go to the gist of your question, does he realize what's in his hands and what's at stake? Is he going to come back with a gravity, understanding what he's holding right now? I do think he will, because he saw how this impacted his family. Not being able to play basketball for this extent, this is the longest Ja has gone without playing in a basketball game in his life. He's lost a couple of endorsements over this. The money is guaranteed, but not necessarily the relevance or the legacy. And I think now he's starting to understand what a legacy is all about. And now he can build to that next step to try to show that he can prove it.
Michael, last one before we go to break here. So I think one of the things that I picked up on, you know, in that is that, you know, there seems to be a lot of remorsefulness, you know, I think in his tone. Do you feel in essence, again, though, the organization has done everything that they've needed to do now for the infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. So again, we talked about bringing in some of those veteran guys. So in this aspect now, because we're going to talk about the basketball part of this here now in a little bit, but is the infrastructure within the team organization, the rules, like we heard some stuff, I think of Steven Adams saying, hey, you know, we're a little loosey-goosey on these road games. You're even saying that he has some people probably in his circle that, you know, whatever or not, that he's had to kind of dwindle down. Is the overall infrastructure now good and right? Has everybody, not just Ja, has everybody learned their lesson here?
Everybody had to, because there were multiple people whose careers and legacies and jobs and professions were on the line as it related to this. This wasn't just a Ja Morant in isolation. There have been adjustments to the way the team travels, to, you know, how meetings and post-game stayovers are structured. There's a level of security now around the team that has elevated and has taken more precise methods in terms of how they're going about operating from a security standpoint. And then there's an expectation ultimately from the front office that, hey, we've checked all of these boxes with the help of the league, also with the help and assistance from Ja's agency, and also everything that the team could do specifically. Now the onus is on Ja Morant to live within those confines, and they're not confines, but just live within those parameters and say, okay, I'm going to keep the focus where it needs to be. Does Ja Morant not have to, like, am I saying Ja Morant won't go out and hang out at a club or a strip club or a bar or a party or something like that after a game? No, I'm not saying that. he should be able to do that. You know, he has a legal right to still be able to be a young man, tapping into his resources and everything. But what you could put to what Ja was guilty of doing, he could do in his own, and he did it in his own car. He did it in a private room. So you could put as many people around him as you want. And if he wants to go on social media and flash a weapon, he can do that no matter what steps you take as an organization, as a city, as a family, as a team. So ultimately, this is about Ja looking internally and saying, look, all of these things have shifted around me to give me the support I need. Now let me act like I understand what the expectation is. And I think so, yes, the organization has done everything it can. Adam Silver in the league has done everything it can. Now it's up to Ja and his inner circle to do what they can to make sure that they don't lose and cost this man the rest of his career.
Man, powerful words, man. I love this. This is Black Man Magic working right about now. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping it's resonating, you know, not just to the Ja Morant, but also the Ja Morant come ups and young men out there who understand that this is more than just a conversation that we're having about a star athlete and what the outcome might be if he continues to have these miscues and make bad decisions of what this could mean. And we'll follow up on that because you mentioned the word legacy, and it's a very interesting topic in the climate of today's NBA and what that actually means to some of these athletes, some of these premier players that we often talk about. And then we'll also talk about the Memphis Grizzlies and what the outcome could be. Can they salvage this season? Is there a play-in future for them? Or is this more of a, reclamation progress, get right season to really turn heads for the 2024, 25 NBA season? So we got all of that and a whole lot more with our special guest, Michael Wallace. He is senior editor, contributor, and analyst for Grind City Media. This is the Baseline Cali. Don't go anywhere. But before you do that, just remember, if you like using debit over credit, I just learned about something that is definitely a game changer. That is Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on tickets for the game, snacks, team merch, all with no fees, making this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC. More Baseline with our special guest, Michael Wallace. Do not go away. This is the Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and with our special guest, the impressionable and one of a kind, as always, man, one of the premier contributors that covers the NBA specifically for the Memphis Grizzlies, our man Michael Wallace. Be sure to check him out at My Mic Check and at Grind City Media. He's senior editor, contributor, analyst for Grind City Media. Michael, thank you for being on board with us to talk about the return of Ja Morant, the Memphis Grizzlies. And let's go ahead and pivot the conversation about what we're talking about with a Memphis Grizzlies team that obviously is struggled at the outset of this season. I think what's really surprised people, and maybe even to Shaw, because we talked about this in our previews, of the Western Conference, is how mightily the Memphis Grizzlies have struggled. Now, there are a lot of transactions that took place in the offseason. We obviously knew that the backcourt was going to look completely different with Dylan Brooks now going on to the Houston Rockets. And for the most part, it was probably going to be more about, Desmond Bane really kind of, finding his own. And it looks like for the most part, we're seeing a different side of him, having to shoulder that. But clearly it was not enough. I think the loss of Steven Adams was even greater, more than anything, to this team. But yet they've been able to hold their own defensively. The struggles has just clearly been offensive. This team just cannot score the basketball and been ravaged with injuries. So obviously Ja Morant's presence alone is going to help this team be a better team offensively. What is it that you are looking for with the return of Ja Morant? Because nobody just comes in and just starts dropping 45, 50 points and things of that nature. But clearly his presence of what he can do to create and make the rest of his teammates better, I think is a lot more of what Taylor Jenkins is putting on. He's on his hands and knees, putting his hands up. His like, this is what I'm looking for. You know what I'm saying? He's in his brat bag. He's saying, this is what I'm looking for.
Hey, it's going to start with pace, right? Like, the thing is, this isn't a wing player. You know what I mean? Where guys find him and get him the ball and set him up. This is the guy that sets the tone. And the Grizzlies have not had a tone setter all season on offense. Marcus Smart, that's not his natural position. He's a capable point guard, but he's more of a combo guard. And he played on Boston teams where Tatum and Brown pretty much initiated the offense. He was a relief option in terms of an initiator. Derrick Rose, God bless him, man. He's having a remarkable time when he's able to be on the floor. I talk to Derrick all the time. I love talking to him about basketball and how he's learning what his body is capable of doing now. But you can't put an enormous load on Derrick Rose night in and night out. So you remove those two guys, you don't have anyone to orchestrate. Desmond Bane has been trying to play de facto point guard. Other guys have been out of position trying to handle. You can't do that in the NBA. And I think that's when you don't have a guy to trigger you and get everyone else organized and knows what everyone else's job is, that's been the biggest struggle. So when you input Ja Morant back into this mix, he cleans that up immediately. He doesn't have to score but 10 points, but he's going to get you in the pace that you need so you can start running again and get transition opportunities. And then he's going to spray it out to guys who are going to be more wide open than they've ever been. And I think initially that's what he's going to give to this team right away. Last time I checked, they were 28th out of 30 NBA teams in offensive rating. You can't do anything in this league when you're that low, right? So, hopefully he can get those guys up immediately, put them in a pace and a comfort level that they can sort of adjust to quickly. And then you start seeing those numbers tick back into a positive direction.
Michael, I'm going to chime in here as well, too. So it's interesting because when we previewed them, right, we've seen this team play without guys before, and they were able to next man up their way. That just has not occurred. So maybe it's too many guys have gone down in addition to the Josh situation, right? But does a team feel that way? So again, with your level of coverage and insight, how do they feel about how they performed in the aspect of like, why haven't they just been able to do the next man up situation? Or are they pointing specifically, well, damn, Josh's not here, and this is why it's been what it's been?
See, here's the thing, and I'll answer this question, Warren, like this. If Carl is sick today or Kyle is sick today, right, you can still pull the podcast off, have another guy come in, sit in, and then have me join, right? But if Kyle is out and your second guy is out and it becomes just you, and then you're trying to work with some students at the nearby university, trying to show them the ropes and get them some experience so they can get their resumes up, you're still doing it, right? You're still operating your show, but you're doing way more than you normally would need to do. And it might not be as entertaining and it might not flow the same way, right? So there's a level where at a certain point, next man up. Then after that, you don't have many more men left, right? Then you're starting to try to fish and find guys to try to help you. And that's going to be very difficult to do. So what I'm saying is that, last year, the last 2 years, the reason why the Grizzlies were able to sustain when Ja Morant was out for 20 plus games, Tyus Jones is one of the best organizers, assist to turnover ratio. He doesn't make mistakes. He still knows how to organize you. He's a calming influence. He knows everybody else's position. But when you take Ja Morant out and now you don't have another point guard and the next guy up is a G League guy that's on a two-way contract, what are you going to do in that situation, man? And I think Steven Adams, Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, Ja Morant, and then you go even further than that. You're removing Dylan Brooks, who was giving you 15 to 20 a game when things were low last year. Kyle Anderson the year before that, DeAnthony Melton the year before that. These are guys who have gone elsewhere and have been contributors to Philly, to Minnesota. Look at Minnesota now. They're the number one team in the West. Your role players went there. So it's so much to overcome. And on top of that, to sum this up from that question, the guys that you picked, the young guys that you brought in weren't ready and aren't ready to step into these roles yet. You've had some guys you're still waiting on 2 and 3 years after you drafted them to be something that they haven't shown that they're capable of sustaining yet. And that's been the biggest problem right there from a lack of depth in production.
Well, what's funny about that is like it got me thinking about and there's a show on ABC, I think it's Designated Survivor, right? So we're no longer that's where we're at with them. And I think that part of it I think has been unfortunate. So I think it very, very eloquently and expertly put. CL.
Yeah, man. Like Shaw knows I love to like do these, out of sports correlations. And I find like what you just described is very much what a lot of people in NFL spaces are talking about with the Kansas City Chiefs. There just comes a point where you can always keep trying to plug and play, But where it started from when they had Tyreek Hill and where you now have, it's like, how far in the bag are you going to go to try to find what it was that made you as potently effective as what this team looked like 2 years ago? There were two iterations of this Memphis Grizzlies team, and we were saying, if they were fully healthy against the Golden State Warriors, could there have been a different song sung about the Warriors winning that championship? Ergo, a lot of that saltiness back and forth between, both of these organizations and the players themselves, because everyone's always questioning a team based on what we see. And then now that we're seeing 3 different iterations of them. And every year, the Memphis Grizzlies seemingly tend to lose some. We don't consider them key pieces, but then when we see how the team operates without that player, they are not the same team. Kyle Anderson being gone, Tyson, all of that was all happening over the last couple of seasons. And you're slowly but surely trying to put that onus on, well, we got John Morant, we're good. If you can't see, we got Patrick Mahomes, we're good. At some point, it ain't really going to be good because he can't do everything for you. So with that being said, Michael, the person that and Sean knows this, because he thinks that I'm trying to be I get hard on try to come down on him all the time. I'm really not. I think he is a really talented player, but I do wonder sometimes, is his numbers becoming empty calorie numbers? And I'm talking about Jaren Jackson Jr. He is the one piece that if you're talking about John Morant and you can move all of these other players, but as long as you're saying John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., that was the combination you started with on the potential about what the Memphis Grizzlies should and could look like. Jaren Jackson has gotten accolades. He's gotten, defensive player of the year, and, he's this, that, and that. But what I'm not seeing is like that impact that he has when John Morant ain't on the basketball court. That impact that he's supposed to have when you don't have all of the necessary parts for you to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies as a contending team. So what are we now going to say? Because obviously he's going to need John Morant more than ever. But is that going to be what the recipe calls for the Memphis Grizzlies to be back where it needs to be? Or should the focal point be on Jaren Jackson Jr. and what he didn't take advantage of when John Morant has been gone all this time?
See, and that's exactly where the question about Jaren Jackson Jr. has elevated. And the fact that people are questioning that now still tells me he still has tremendous upside and people expect him to be at a certain level, and he's still capable of getting there. When Jason Tatum isn't playing well, Brown is ready to roll. Like Brown kept them in the finals the other year when Jason Tatum was going up and down, right? When Jokic is having one of his, meltdown moments, Jamal Murray is going to do his thing and figure out how to get the team over the hump in that situation. We've seen it time and time again. We have seen some up and down with Anthony Davis, but I'm just thinking from a contender standpoint, it's just certain guys around the league that are going to bring it. We're seeing that now in Philly. Joel Embiid is going to do his thing, but he can rely on Maxey as much as any player who they've spent buku money on trying to bring in for him to rely on. And Maxey's the guy that they just kind of developed and look at what he is now. You can believe in those guys. With Jaren, and to Jaren's point, there's nothing that Jaren can't do. He can score at all 3 levels. He can defend at all 3 levels. He can defend the pick and roll and stay with point guards for 2-3 steps until help arrives. He can definitely protect the rim. I want to see him rebound a little bit more, but I give him a little bit of a pass on that because if you're chasing down blocks, the next guy behind you is supposed to snag the rebound. But having said all of that, Jaren still has to prove that, hey, if this guy is out, I can carry this team to wins. Right. I can carry them to a 7-3 stretch over a 10-game spell. Right. And I haven't seen that from Jaren yet. I've seen the numbers, but I haven't seen the sustained impact of him being an alpha guy. Some of that is personality. Some of that is just the way the style is that he plays. And some of that is that he's just trying to be too much of a team player. But I think Jaren has to get that mean streak and be responsible for now saying, okay, Ja, you've been gone for 25 years. Now, Desmond has done that. Desmond has stepped in. My question now is Ja going to be able to acquiesce to Bane a little bit more now? Because Bane is the guy that you got to continue to get off. Is Ja going to be able to allow himself to say, hey, let me let Bane lead, let me set him up, and then I'll get mine at a certain point? I wish that was more Jaren, but Bane has that kind of temperament that you're asking about in terms of what Jaren can have. Jaren is just going to have to understand if he's your number 3, then he has to be the number 3. I've seen this firsthand. And Shaw knows this because I've been down in Miami. Big three. Chris Bosh faced the same type of dynamic alongside Dwayne Wade and LeBron James. Chris Bosh was comfortable being what he was. Jaren has to get to that level where when he's called upon, he can step up and do what he needs to do.
Michael, so I think what is Taylor saying on the sidelines when it comes to that specifically? I mean, we all watch the league and see that. It's like, damn, we wish Jaren would rebound more.
Yeah.
we all say that, right? But yeah, he does have a DPOY on his resume, and he doesn't seem like somebody who's like overly concerned about awards or accolades in that capacity. But I think as you're talking about, and something we'll get to obviously again, is the legacy of he himself as a player and what he brings to this Memphis franchise. So how is Taylor helping him craft that message and how he can be in better spots to be more of a contributor and be more aggressive?
He has, man. He's given him, at a certain point, this is year 7 for Jaren. He's going into year 7, year 6.
I know, this is remarkable. He's 7 years in the league already.
Yeah, he's been there. Like, I'm trying to remember, make sure I have this right, because this is year 5 for Ja, so this is year 6 for Jaren. I'm giving him one too many years, but he's been in the league, half a dozen years now. At this point, it's not about the coach saying, "Hey, let me open up this thing for you to be able to do. Let me run this." It's for you to say, "Hey, let me go get this. This is what I need to do. Let me dictate a certain amount of plays every single game that we're going to go do this." Same way Zebo used to do. Turn 4. We're going to come down no matter what the coach said. We're going to run turn 4. That means I'm going to get to my spot in the mid post. Conley's going to come through. He's going to set me up, and I'm going to go face up, and then I'm going to read the rest of I'm going to read and react from there. Jaren has to be that deliberate, and he has it. He can do it. It's just that he has to want to continue to do it. We're starting to see that over this last 4 or 5 game stretch when he put up 41 and then 44. And he's looking at mismatches and saying, okay, this guy can't guard me. Let me go hard at this guy. So he's got to continue to do that. And they're going to make space for him to do it. But he's got to just be consistent with it. And if he can be consistent with it, then again, like I said, you got 3 guys that if they're playing on their game, the Grizzlies will easily don't look at the record now. Look at the record from the moment Ja comes back over the next 20. And if the Grizzlies aren't somewhere between 14-6, if they can get to 14-6 in that next 20 or, 13-7, then you're starting to say, okay, these guys will be where they need to be by the time the season ends back in that playoff mix. But it's going to take all 3 of them being able to do it. And all 3 are going to have to stay healthy.
Senior editor, contributor, and analyst for Grind City Media, our man Michael Wallace, joining us here on the baseline. Be sure to get him at My Mike Check or at Grind City Media. Coming up, we're going to continue with that conversation about where the Grizzlies can find themselves by season's end, and if whether or not the legacy of Ja Morant can be rewritten at the outset of when he comes back. So you don't want to miss out. But before you do that, just remember that if you are looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear, look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Go visit the NBA store today by clicking our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store/Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link. And as always, we thank you for your support. More Baseline with our special guest, Michael Wallace. Don't go away. We are back. Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest, senior editor and contributor, analyst for Grind City Media, our man Michael Wallace, as we continue this extensive conversation of the Memphis Grizzlies and the return for Ja Morant.
Michael, I'm going to jump in here and just as where we left off before the break. So you said next 20 games of how we should be kind of judging this team, right? And I think that's obviously a very fair assessment. What is their mindset? Do they feel like this is a lost season in any capacity, or do they see it Ja as like, oh, now we're ready to rock. This is saving our season? Because there's going to have to be a line of demarcation, right? At some point, it's like, all right, this isn't our year. Like we're not there yet, I guess, from what you're saying, but what is exactly expectations of Ja coming back here? And should he be labeled as the savior of the season, if you will? Or is that too lofty?
No, that's not too lofty, and you got to thank the NBA play-in tournament schedule for that, right? Now that you have 7, 8, 9, 10, you got 2 extra teams that are in the mix. Getting to 10 isn't as difficult, right? Now, if we're talking about the traditional format where you had to get up to 8 to lock yourself into a playoff, that will be difficult, right? That will be, okay, let's see how these next 10 to 20 games go, 10 to 15 games. And if we can't make up any ground, then you got to look at the long-term health. Do you want to continue to push these guys? Do you want to see what you can do develop-wise? Do you want to start looking at asset management and go into the February trade deadline and then reshuffle things? But because you can get to 10, and this team is a believer that even if it's the play-in, we got to remember the Grizzlies won a play-in 4 years ago. That's how this thing got started, when they beat San Antonio in the 9-10, then went to Golden State and knocked off Steph Curry and Golden State to secure their spot in the playoffs, 4 years ago. Then they've made 3 straight trips to the playoffs since then. So this team knows the power of what the play-in can do. Is this team as constituted a play-in team? No. But they have to get healthy, and they have to get healthy in a hurry. It starts with Ja Morant coming back this coming week, and then you roll Marcus Smart back into the mix. He's been out for the last 12 games. He's missed almost a month, essentially, with the mid-foot sprain, and he's on the way to coming back now. Then after that, Luke Kennard should be able to get back to give you your sharpshooter off the bench traditionally. So then when you look at that, now all of a sudden you have a backcourt where your rotation is Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard. That's some firepower. We talked about fixing the offense earlier. That's an immediate fix once those guys can get back healthy. So then you say, like I said, these next 20 games, if you're healthy and you're at that 13-7 at worst, 15-5 at best, somewhere in there, then you're starting to make up ground. They're 12 games below 500. You go 15-5 over a 20-game stretch. Now all of a sudden you're right back at 500 almost, just 2 games back going into the All-Star break. And I think that's what their target is between now and the All-Star break. Can we get as close to 500 as possible? Maybe get up to 9, flirt with 8, get in that range, and then let's see what we do the final stretch of the season and try to make some ground from there. But I think these guys do still believe they can do it. They just have to be healthy. Now, I'll add one last thing, and you can get to the follow-up. The one last thing I'll ask is that is a lot to ask from a team who has been completely unhealthy the last 2 years, because Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. combined have missed only 1 game this season. That hasn't happened. Now you expect them to go another 25 games and not miss time? That's hard to ask in the NBA when you already have this much mileage on guys. Traditionally, somebody is going to go down and somebody's going to have to deal with something. You've avoided it so far with Dez and Jaren. You just have to continue to get some injury luck with those 2 guys. Then you might have a chance.
All right. I got to stop asking questions. You're giving me so much. You want to get my guy Cal back up in here as well, too.
Yeah, no, you're
good. In this aspect, one, is there going to be a ramp-up period for Ja, coming back, or is he's just ready to go and play 30, 35 minutes a night? And then 2, as you were listing off those guys, what do you anticipate being the starting lineup? Would they start the 3-guard rotation, or how does that work?
No, when Ja is back, he's back. Right. Like now, again, the first game, it's going to be the second night of a back-to-back. Some guys that you have to rely on in Oklahoma City, especially if Jaren and Dez have to go really, really extended minutes against Oklahoma City, you got to monitor that the next night in New Orleans, another high-energy team when they're healthy. But I don't expect Ja to be like minutes restriction or anything like that. He's been practicing. He's been up to speed. He's just going to have to get his win. Once his second win kicks in, he'll be fine from that standpoint. So I think, maybe 3-4 games, you might see him somewhere between 25 and 37 minutes, right? It'll be that range, depending on how the games and the outcomes are going. What the starting lineup would be once everybody is completely healthy, your guess technically is good as mine, because I haven't seen that yet with these guys. But I think theoretically what they would like to get to is Marcus Smart, Ja Morant in the backcourt, Desmond Bane. So you're going a 3-guard lineup right there. And then at 4 and 5, you're looking at Jaren Jackson Jr. and Bismack Biyombo, who's likely to be signed, stick around with this team for the rest of the season because Steven Adams is done for the year.
Man, oh man, oh man. So many good points you've made, Michael. So many good points. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible.
You're good. You're good.
It's interesting to me that what we're talking about for this team to really elevate themselves is the improvement on their offense. I think their defense is good. I don't think anyone is questioning that the Memphis Grizzlies are their grit and grind, so to speak, has been their calling card to play defense and really hold teams within something respectable of a range where they're giving themselves chance on a night in, night out basis. I think it'll be interesting given how Ja Morant is as a player. that what you were saying earlier before, if this team's expectation is they need to play with better pace, there's a risk factor involved. Could mean that they may compromise something of what they have been doing defensively, collectively as a team. Now that John Morant, not saying John Morant's a bad defensive player. I'm just saying with someone who plays at the pace that he plays, you're going to have to give up some to get some, right? But maybe in the grand scheme of things, that is exactly what's going to need to happen if we're going to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies and take them, seriously. I've often said defense is hard to get right if your team just can't play defense, period. The offense can always be good if you've got offensive players and you got offensive players coming back to the roster. The one person you mentioned to me who I thought was so key that we didn't even talk about him because he hasn't been around, Luke Kennard. This team is god-awful shooting the three. Obviously, and I'm not saying Desmond Bane doesn't help him. I'm not saying Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't get his, and John Morant, he'll sprinkle in some. But the fact that Luke Kennard is going to be able to come back to this roster, I think can help open things up for this team a little bit. The thing that I question more, because you mentioned the 3-guard lineup, is their ability to rebound the basketball. And limiting second chance opportunities against the better offensive teams that they'll be playing against in those stretch of games that we're talking about, really viewing whether or not the Grizzlies can make this turnaround happen. What are your thoughts about that? As far as, do they have the bodies? Or are they going to have to lean in that bag and find a guy to come step up? Because he ain't going to be getting that from Bismack Biyombo like that. You know what I'm saying? Jaren Jackson Jr. don't want to be in the paint like that unless he decides to. Maybe John Morant gets him in that space where that's what he's got to do. But what are we seeing from this team from a rebounding perspective that's going to be able to elevate them to that space?
That's a great question, and that's the Achilles heel of this team right now, especially with Steven Adams, because he was such a great offensive rebounder and he could do it on the defensive end as well. So, his bread and butter was rebounding and passing. You don't have that certified, I'm going to get 10 rebounds a game kind of guy that you've committed to yet. Jaren Jackson, he hasn't proven to be a double-figure rebounder a night, right? The good thing to sort of acquiesce that a little bit is John Morant is a plus rebounder at a point guard position. He's averaging about 5 rebounds. Marcus Smart is definitely a plus rebounder in terms of what he's able to do from that standpoint. Desmond Bane is also right around 5. So your wings are better rebounders than their positions sort of would indicate. Now what you have to hope, though, is that in lieu of rebounding, you're getting deflections and steals. The Grizzlies, where they come short in rebounding, they are great in stocks, combined steals and blocks. They've been among the league's leader the last 3 years, including this season, as bad as things have gone, in combined steals and blocks per game. They're averaging somewhere around 13 steals and blocks a game. That creates extra transition opportunities. So you're not necessarily getting rebounds, but you're getting steals, you're getting deflections, you're getting out and running. So when you have Ja now spearheading as the outlet guy to get the ball after a steal and a deflection and a block, then you're getting paint points. You're forcing teams now to have to get back in transition to defend you. You're attacking the rim. You're putting other teams in foul trouble. So you're eliminating some of the things that are your weaknesses and forcing some weaknesses on some other teams, dictating at your tone, your pace, your tempo. So sometimes the best defense is not having to play it at all at the rim when it comes to rebounding and get the other team on the defensive side a lot more. So we'll see. I'm saying that this is a pie in the sky type theory. When you get to the playoffs, these possessions, shrink, and you have to be a better rebounding team. And that's what's hurt the Grizzlies in the playoffs the last couple of years. But for right now, they'll be able to adjust and address those things as they go because of things that's going to happen with the personnel improvement.
Michael, last one for me. And I want to kind of ask this question and I'm going to try to be more positive. I feel like, we haven't been negative, but there's been skepticism, I think, on the show.
And you got to be 6-18, right? 6. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, what other 6-18 can we be positive about? Like, it's hard to find it when the reality is, it's not negative, it's reality. So let's look at it like that. We're dealing with reality with these guys, and even though I cover them and I'm around them every day, I'm on the team plane, but I travel with these guys. I broadcast the games on the radio for them. I'm on TV pregame. And post-game elements with these guys. Like, I can be real about what their weaknesses are and what their differences are. And that's what we're doing. We're just saying, hey, this is what they've shown. These are the reasons why. And here's how it might be able to get fixed if they have a chance.
So I'm going to take it to the aspect. I'm going to start negative and go to the positive. So my guy, Cal, he tapped our guy Zaire Williams here as kind of a potential breakout candidate. He started in the starting lineup and has since regressed, I guess, and not really quite sure what his minutes are right now. But has there been a surprise, from you, something that you can point to, like, well, that's been positive, maybe from a player or something, or a statistic maybe that you didn't necessarily see it was coming? I think Bismack has been great. Santi has been pretty good as well too. But from your side, from your standpoint, and maybe even the teams, what's been one of the bigger and more positive surprises of what has been a struggling season otherwise?
Well, one of the biggest positive surprises to me was this team started, I think, 3-0 when Derrick Rose was in the starting lineup. When he's been available, he's been able to give you some shooting from distance. He's been able to get to the rim. He just hasn't been able to play every single game. But he's giving you what you expected out of your third point guard. It's just he had to become next man up and then next man up again as your starter in situations. So I think he's been positive from that standpoint. You were able to find two guys off the scrap heap that gave you some real production when you absolutely desperately needed bodies. Bismack Biyombo was signed, from a injury exception when you lost Steven Adams and John Morant suspension. Then you doubled down and got Jalen Noel on 2 10-day contracts, a guy who played in 9 games, started one for you, gave you a couple of punches here and there offensively, gave you a little bit of a spark. So they've been able to tweak and get some emergency help when they needed it. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane are having career seasons when it comes to the offensive production that they're showing. So those are also positives from that standpoint. The Grizzlies' depth hadn't been where it needed to be yet, but you've had a guy like Vince Williams Jr. emerge from being the last guy in their draft class from 2022 to being now the starter who replaced the other guy you mentioned, Zaire Williams, in terms of having a wing 3-and-D guy that is giving you some punch defensively and also doing some things offensively to help you as an emergency offensive threat. So there are some positives there that you can build from, but it all doesn't matter unless you have your key pieces, right? Like you can have a whole bunch of, like it's like having Thanksgiving dinner without the ham or the turkey there. Yeah, we can have a great feast with the sides because the sides are all phenomenal. Some people prefer the sides over the meats, right? But if you don't have your turkey and your ham as the anchor of the table, it just throws the meal off a little bit.
I just want the ham. Just give me the damn turkey. Yeah, just give me the ham and the sides.
Yeah. So what
you don't gotta be diplomatic for our listeners, man. They understand the real. Don't be coming at me with no nonsense about some.
No, it's real. I mean, like I said, man, it's you don't even call it Thanksgiving if that bird isn't being pulled out the oven, right?
Yes.
So I mean, like, what are you setting the table around if the bird isn't there in the middle? And I think now you get the bird back now, and now you have your secondary main courses with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and now you can look at what the Grizzlies are theoretically supposed to look like in the next couple of games.
All right, Michael. So then let's get right to it, man. I'm gonna ask you to address the dressing on the table. When it comes to sleep. If the Memphis Grizzlies make it into either play-in or playoffs, one, what does this say about the legacy of Ja Morant? Right? Like, how does that boost? You know what I'm saying? Him in essence, and how confident, like on a scale of say 1 to 5, how confident will you say that the Memphis Grizzlies would be considered the most dangerous team you don't want to play against if that turnaround does seem to happen for this team?
I do think that the Grizzlies are able to go from where they are right now, which is 13th in the West, it's almost 6.5, 7 games out of the 10th spot right now. If they are able to make up that ground and get into a play-in in the playoffs, I think Ja Morant will go into next season as a top 3 MVP candidate. I really do. And that's because the work that it's going to take for them to get to that point is going to set the stage for next season. He can't be all NBA this year. He's missed too many games already. He can't factor in the league superlatives this year. He's missed too many games already. But for him to do it and for the Grizzlies to get where they need to go with him leading the way, I think that's going to easily put him in a discussion as a certified top 3 MVP candidate next year. And then once they get to the play-in, if that is the case, I would say this makes them as dangerous as the Miami Heat were last year when they went in as the number 8 seed and ended up getting to the NBA Finals. And when the Lakers won the play-in, was the number 8 seed in the West and got to the Western Conference Finals. They will be just as dangerous as either one of those teams, and you won't want to play a fully healthy Grizzlies team, especially having to come to FedEx Forum for at least a couple of those games. It's going to be a difficult task. Because if the standings hold the way that they are now, teams at the top, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, they haven't been deep into the playoffs in the last couple of years, so they won't have that kind of experience. The teams in the middle all know what it's like. But if the standings hold, I mean, and the Grizzlies can get to 8 and they're playing Minnesota in the first round and both teams are fully healthy, that's a pick 'em. That's a pick 'em. And the Grizzlies are actually in the Timberwolves' head because they knocked them out of the playoffs the last time they faced in the playoffs. So that's one of those things where, hey, I mean, look, you roll the dice and you see what happens at that point.
All right. You heard it first, man. Like, this is what I love about it. Michael, man. You've been away from us too long, man. We got to bring you. Listen, I know you got a lot of things going on, man. You got to cover so much. You got to wear so many hats for the Memphis Grizzlies. You know what I'm saying? I get it. But, man, we love every aspect of you being on this show, and we love everything that you've basically been able to lay out. So insightful. And, you know, again, we so much appreciate you, you know, really kind of putting the pulse right where it needs to be about how we need to look at the remainder of this Memphis Grizzlies season. And ultimately what we're looking at as far as Ja Morant's comeuppance. You know what I mean? Like this is his time to shine. And I think we all agree if he could figure out a way to make this happen, not only would the Memphis Grizzlies put smiles on faces, for you put smiles on faces, we'll put smiles on faces on everybody in the NBA, because they will be talking about a story that I don't think anybody saw coming.
No, you're absolutely right, man. I don't want to put too much on the young man, but you know, again, his shoulders are strong enough to carry this burden, and we'll see where it goes. I'm sorry, Shaw. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You didn't cut me off at all, bro. I think all it is I think everybody likes a reclamation progress and something like, well, they want to see that positivity. And I think even Adam Silver and company would love to see this go in the direction it was originally heading. So if it goes, it went left, but if it can get back on track in some capacity, I think that'll be amazing. And I'm really anxious to see how the fans respond as well too. And I guess, you know, like real quick, because we got to wrap. But what do you think the fan response will be when he takes the floor in FedEx Forum for the first time?
You know, that was one of the things that Ja did in his press conference when he said, "Look, I want the fans to know one thing, and that's as much as they miss me, right? And I can't wait to see them too." So that place is going to be electric, and that first home game at FedEx Forum with Ja is going to be a track meet because he's going up against the new darling at the point guard position in Tyrese Halliburton. So it's Indiana and Memphis playing on Thursday in that first game back. So it's going to be an electric atmosphere. They're going to go absolutely crazy when Ja Morant shows up, because he has not been able to be in the building for games all the way up until that day. So that'll be the first one. It's going to be an electric atmosphere for sure.
I think he'll genuinely be nervous too. I think he's going to have like those jitters, not just because, you know, he's coming back from suspension, but I think because he wants to really do well.
That's his sanctuary, man. He said basketball is therapeutic to him. This is the space where he became who he is, and he's going to make his legacy right there. So yeah, he's going to be nervous. It's overwhelming. Like this will be the first time again, like he's playing his first NBA game all over again. But it'll be when he's going to get that feel on against the Pelicans, because he's going up against his buddy, his South Carolina mate in Zion Williamson one day, and then 2 days later he's going to be doing it at home against Tyrese Halliburton. So it's like diving in the deep end, man. He's not going to be able to enter in the shallow waters. He's got to dive head first in the deep end and sink or swim these first few games.
Man, let me tell you, it's going to be some exciting basketball to watch over this next couple of weeks. Once again, man, as always, be sure to check out our man, senior editor, contributor, and analyst for Grind City Media, our man, Michael Wallace, at My Mic Check or at Grind City Media. For the baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for hopping on board with us this week. Great conversation to be had, and we'll catch up with you next time.